The dust settled around Martha Henley's boots as she stood over the fresh grave, her weathered hands clutching a worn Bible against her chest. The Wyoming wind carried the scent of sage and the distant promise of snow, reminding her that winter was coming fast. At 52, she had buried more dreams than most folks ever dared to have, and now she had buried her husband too. The tuberculosis had taken him slow, eating away at his lungs like rust on iron, leaving her with nothing but a failing ranch and debts that stretched longer than the horizon. The small crowd of neighbors and townsfolk had dispersed an hour ago, their condolences hanging in the air like morning mist. Now it was just Martha, and the endless expanse of grassland that had once felt like freedom, but now felt like a prison. She turned away from the grave and walked toward the ranch house, each step heavier than the last. The wooden structure groaned in the wind, its paint peeling like old skin, telling the story of dreams deferred and hopes weathered by time. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards echoed the absence of Thomas's heavy footsteps. Every shadow seemed to mock her solitude. She moved through the rooms mechanically, gathering what little she could carry. The bank would come for the rest soon enough. 27 years of marriage, of building something from nothing, reduced to a single carpet bag and whatever coins she could scrape together from the coffee tin behind the flour barrel. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust, Martha loaded her few belongings into the wagon. The old mare, Buttercup, snorted and stamped, sensing the change that was coming. Martha had nowhere to go except the mercy of distant relatives in Colorado who might take her in out of Christian duty if not genuine affection. The thought of becoming a burden, of living on charity, made her stomach twist with something worse than hunger. She was securing the last of her belongings when she heard it, a sound so faint she almost missed it over the wind. Crying. Not the wail of a coyote or the call of a night bird, but the unmistakable sob of a child. Martha froze, her hand still gripping the rope. The sound came again, closer now, from somewhere near the old barn. Following the sound, Martha discovered a small figure huddled in the shadow of the barn's doorway. It was a girl, no more than 8 or 9, with tangled blonde hair and clothes that had seen better days. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, and her thin arms were wrapped around her knees as she rocked back and forth. When she saw Martha approaching, she scrambled backward like a frightened animal. "Easy, child," Martha said softly, crouching down to make herself less imposing. "I'm not going to hurt you. What are you doing out here all alone?" The girl's eyes, blue as cornflowers, darted between Martha and the open prairie beyond. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean no harm. I was just looking for somewhere to sleep, and this place looked empty." "Where are your folks, honey?" The girl's lower lip trembled. "Dead, both of 'em. Fever took Mama last month, and Papa died 3 days back. They put me with the Kincaids, but—" She shuddered. Mr. Kincaid, he had hands that wandered, and Mrs. Kincaid said I was just another mouth to feed. So I ran. Martha felt her heart clench. She knew the Kincaids by reputation, a hard family that treated their animals better than their children. The thought of this tiny creature at their mercy made something fierce and protective rise in her chest. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lucy. Lucy May Porter." The girl wiped her nose on her sleeve. "I know I'm trespassing, Mom, but I didn't know where else to go. Everyone in town's got their own troubles, and nobody wants a girl who can't earn her keep." Martha studied the child's face, seeing something of herself in those scared but determined eyes. Here was another soul cast adrift by circumstances beyond her control, another casualty of a world that could be cruel to those who had nothing to offer but their need. "How long has it been since you've had a proper meal?" Lucy's stomach answered with a loud growl that made her cheeks redden with embarrassment. 2 days, I reckon. Maybe 3. Time gets fuzzy when you're hungry." Without another word, Martha stood and extended her hand. "Come on then, let's get you fed." Lucy hesitated, her eyes searching Martha's face for any sign of deception. "You mean it? You're not going to turn me over to the sheriff? The sheriff's got better things to do than chase after little girls who've done nothing wrong but survive." Martha kept her hand extended. Patient as stone, "Trust is a leap of faith, child. Sometimes you have to jump and hope someone's there to catch you." Slowly, Lucy reached out and took Martha's calloused hand. Her fingers were so small, so cold, that Martha felt her resolve harden into something unbreakable. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't let this child face the world alone. Back in the kitchen, Martha worked with practiced efficiency, preparing a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. Lucy sat at the worn wooden table, her eyes following every movement with the watchfulness of someone who had learned not to trust in permanence. When Martha set the plate before her, the girl stared at it as if it might vanish if she looked away. "Go on," Martha encouraged. "Add up. There's plenty more where that came from." Lucy ate with the desperate hunger of the truly starving, pausing only to murmur thanks between bites. Martha watched her, remembering her own childhood hunger during the lean years after her father died in the war. She had been lucky then, taken in by an aunt who saw children as blessings rather than burdens. Not every orphan was so fortunate. "Mrs. Lucy began hesitantly. "Henley. Martha Henley, and you don't need to call me ma'am. Martha will do just fine." "Martha," Lucy repeated, testing the name. "That's pretty. Like in the Bible. My mother had hopes I'd be the practical sort. Guess she got her wish." Martha poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from the girl. "Lucy May is a fine name, too. May was my sister's middle name." Was she dead, too? The simple question, asked with a child's directness, hit Martha harder than she expected. "Most everyone I ever loved is dead, honey. That's what happens when you live long enough. But that doesn't mean love stops mattering." They sat in comfortable silence as Lucy finished her meal. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and sending tumbleweeds dancing across the yard like ghostly dancers. The oil lamp flickered, casting shifting shadows on the walls, and Martha found herself thinking about the irony of the situation. Here she was, about to lose her home, and she had invited in another mouth to feed. "Martha?" Lucy's voice was small in the gathering darkness. "Where will you go? When you leave this place, I mean. I saw you packing the wagon." Martha had hoped the child wouldn't notice, but Lucy's eyes missed little. "I've got family in Colorado. They might take me in for a while. What about me?" The question hung between them like a bridge half built, waiting for someone to decide whether to complete it or let it fall. Martha looked at this girl who had stumbled into her life at the exact moment when both their worlds were crumbling, and she saw something that made her breath catch. She saw possibility. "I don't rightly know, Lucy May. I don't have much to offer anyone right now." Lucy pushed her empty plate aside and leaned forward, her young face serious beyond her years. "My papa always said that when two broken things come together, sometimes they can make something whole. Maybe you need someone to care for, and I need someone to care for me." The wisdom in those words, spoken by a child who should have been playing with dolls instead of negotiating for survival, pierced Martha's heart. She thought about the empty years stretching ahead, living on the charity of relatives who would count every bite of food she took, every night she spent under their roof. She thought about Lucy, alone and vulnerable, with nothing but her wits to protect her from a world that devoured the defenseless. "You know what you're suggesting, child. Taking care of each other isn't just about sharing meals and having company. It means responsibility. It means making choices that put the other person's welfare ahead of your own comfort. It means staying even when things get hard." Lucy nodded solemnly. "I know about staying when things get hard. I stayed with Mama when she was sick, even when she didn't know who I was anymore. I stayed with Papa till he drew his last breath. I stayed with the Kincaids until staying became more dangerous than leaving. But this would be different. This would be choosing to stay because we want to, not because we have to." Martha felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time someone had wanted her company rather than merely tolerating it? When was the last time her presence had been a gift rather than a burden? "What you're talking about, it won't be easy. I don't have a home anymore, Lucy. I don't have money or prospects. All I have is a strong back and a willingness to work, and that might not be enough to keep us both fed. Then we'll make it enough." Lucy reached across the table and covered Martha's weathered hand with her small one. "You said trust is a leap of faith. Maybe family is too. Maybe we don't have to be born to each other to belong to each other." The simple truth of it settled over Martha like a warm blanket. Family wasn't just blood and shared names. It was choice and commitment, care and sacrifice freely given. It was what you built when the world knocked down everything else. She thought of the grave outside, of the man who had loved her, but could no longer be her anchor in the storm. Perhaps it was time to learn a different kind of love, the love that chose to see possibility in ruins, hope in desperation. "You sure about this, Lucy May? I'm old enough to be your grandmother, and I've got a sharp tongue when I'm worried. I don't know much about raising children, and I might make a mess of it." Lucy smiled, and for the first time since Martha had found her, The expression reached her eyes. And I don't know much about having a mother, since mine's been gone so long, but maybe we can figure it out together. Maybe we can make our own kind of family. Martha squeezed the small hand in hers, feeling something long frozen in her chest begin to thaw. All right then. But we'll do this proper. No more running away, no more hiding in barns. If we're going to be family, we'll face whatever comes together, out in the open. What do we do first? Martha looked around the kitchen that had been her home for so many years, at the evidence of a life she was about to leave behind. Tomorrow the bank would come, and this chapter would close forever. But maybe endings were just beginnings wearing different clothes. First, we get some sleep. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to make a life together. Won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. She led Lucy to the small bedroom that had been meant for the children she and Thomas never had, brushing dust off the quilt her mother had sewn decades ago. As she tucked Lucy in, the girl caught her hand. Martha, do you think they're watching? My mama and papa. Your husband. Do you think they're glad we found each other? Martha looked out the window at the stars scattered across the vast Wyoming sky like seeds of light. Somewhere out there, in the mystery beyond knowing, she liked to believe that love continued, that those who had gone before still cared about those left behind. I think love like that doesn't just disappear when someone dies. I think it finds new ways to keep working in the world. Maybe it brought us together. I'd like that, Lucy whispered, her eyes already growing heavy with exhaustion and relief. I'd like to think Mama helped find me a new mama, even if she's different than what I expected. Different how? Older, more wrinkled. Probably gonna boss me around more. Lucy's grin was sleepy but mischievous. You can count on that last part, little miss. Martha smoothed the hair back from Lucy's forehead, the gesture feeling as natural as breathing. Sleep now. We've got a long road ahead, and we'll need our strength. But as Martha prepared for bed in her own room, sleep proved elusive. She found herself planning, imagining, hoping in ways she hadn't for months. Colorado would have opportunities for a woman willing to work hard, maybe cleaning houses or taking in washing, maybe cooking for miners or cowboys. And Lucy was bright, quick with her hands and her mind. Between the two of them, they could make something work. More than that, they could make something that mattered. Martha had forgotten what it felt like to be needed, to have someone depend on her not out of duty, but out of choice. And perhaps Lucy would help her remember what it felt like to look forward instead of backward, to plan for tomorrows instead of mourning yesterdays. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with frost painting the grass silver. Martha woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving carefully in the kitchen. She found Lucy standing on a chair, tending to eggs in the skillet with the concentration of a master chef. Thought you might be hungry when you woke up, Lucy said without turning around. I'm not much of a cook yet, but I can manage eggs and coffee. That's more than enough. Martha accepted the cup Lucy poured for her, noting how the girl had remembered that she took it black. Small things, but they mattered. They were the building blocks of knowing someone, caring for them. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. Besides, if we're going to be family, we should start acting like it. That means taking care of each other. They ate breakfast as the sun climbed higher, discussing practical matters. The bank official would arrive around noon to take possession of the property. Martha's belongings were already packed, and now they would take only what could fit in the wagon along with Lucy's meager possessions. Everything else would stay behind: furniture, dishes, memories made solid in wood and metal and glass. Do you mind? Martha asked as they prepared to load Lucy's few things into the wagon. Leaving your parents' things behind. Lucy was quiet for a long moment, holding a small wooden horse that must have been a treasured toy. I used to think I needed to keep everything, like if I lost their things I'd lose them too. But Papa told me once that love lives in here. She tapped her chest, not in things. The things that really matter, I'll carry with me. She tucked the wooden horse into her bundle and looked up at Martha with eyes that held too much wisdom for their years. Besides, I'm not just losing anymore. I'm gaining something too. The bank official arrived precisely at noon. A thin man in a dusty suit who went through the formalities with efficient politeness. Martha signed the papers that transferred ownership, each signature feeling like a small death. But when she looked at Lucy, standing beside her with quiet dignity, the loss felt manageable. Endings, she was learning, could also be beginnings. As their wagon rolled away from the ranch, Martha didn't look back. Instead, She watched Lucy's face as they crested the hill that would take the familiar landscape out of sight forever. The girl was crying silently, tears for her own losses mixing with tears for Martha's. But her small hand found Martha's larger one, and they held on to each other as the miles passed beneath the wagon wheels. "Where exactly are we going?" Lucy asked as they made camp that first night under a canopy of stars. "A town called Cedar Ridge, about a week's travel south. My cousin Rose lives there with her husband. They have a boarding house." Martha poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks rise into the darkness. "I sent them a letter months ago, when Thomas first took sick." Rose wrote back saying they could use help with the cooking and cleaning, especially with winter coming on. "Did you tell them about me?" Martha met Lucy's eyes across the fire. "No, I didn't know about you then. But Rose has a good heart. She'll understand." Lucy nodded, seeming to accept this uncertainty with the resilience that had already carried her through so much loss. "And if she doesn't? Then we'll figure something else out. That's what families do if they adapt. They find ways to make things work." Martha spread her bedroll close to Lucy's, close enough that the child wouldn't feel alone in the vastness of the prairie night. "I won't lie to you, Lucy May. I don't know what's waiting for us, but I know we'll face it together." The journey to Cedar Ridge tested them both in ways they hadn't anticipated. A broken wagon wheel cost them a day and most of their emergency money. A sudden storm soaked them through and forced them to take shelter in an abandoned soddy that leaked like a sieve. Lucy developed a cough that kept Martha awake with worry, and Martha's arthritis flared in the damp weather, making every movement painful. But through each hardship, they learned about each other. Martha discovered that Lucy could sing like an angel, her clear voice turning their campfire evenings into something approaching magic. Lucy learned that Martha could tell stories that made the miles pass like minutes. Tales of her childhood and her adventures as a young woman that painted pictures of a world full of possibility. More importantly, they learned to depend on each other. When Lucy's cough worsened, Martha wrapped her in every blanket they had and brewed tea from herbs she found growing wild along the creek beds. When Martha's hands were too stiff to manage the harness in the cold morning air, Lucy's nimble fingers took over the task without being asked. They were becoming something new, something that neither had been before. Not just a woman and a child thrown together by circumstance, but a family forged by choice and tempered by shared struggle. By the time Cedar Ridge appeared on the horizon, dusty and ramshackle but somehow welcoming in the afternoon light, Martha felt ready to face whatever came next. Rose's boarding house stood at the edge of town, a 2-story frame building that had seen better days but still maintained a certain dignity. Martha's cousin met them at the front door, her plump face creased with concern and curiosity as she took in the sight of Martha and her young companion. "Martha Henley, you look like you've been through a war," Rose declared, pulling her into a fierce hug. "And who's this little mite?" "This is Lucy May," Martha said, resting a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. She's mine now. Family." Rose's eyebrows climbed toward her graying hairline, but her smile never wavered. "Is that so? Well then, Lucy May, any family of Martha's is family of mine. Come on in, both of you. You look like you could use a hot meal and a real bed." The boarding house was warm and bustling with activity. Rose's husband Frank, a bear-like man with gentle eyes, welcomed them with the same easy acceptance as his wife. Over dinner, Martha told their story carefully, leaving out the worst details of Lucy's experience with the Kincaids, but making it clear that they came as a package. "Lord knows we can use the help," Rose said when Martha finished. "This place keeps Frank and me hopping, especially with winter coming on. The railroad crews will be looking for warm beds and hot meals, and the silver mine up in the hills brings in prospectors and gamblers and all sorts. You'd earn your keep and then some." "And Lucy?" Martha asked. "Child that age can be a real help around here. Changing linens, helping with the cooking, keeping the fires stoked. Plus, there's a school in town. Teacher's a nice woman, educated back east. Lucy May looks bright enough to benefit from proper schooling." Lucy's eyes widened at this unexpected gift. "Real school. With books and everything. Books and slates and more arithmetic than you'll know what to do with." Frank chuckled. "Miss Henderson's been teaching here 3 years now, and she's turned out some fine students." That night, as Martha and Lucy settled into the small room Rose had prepared for them, the girl could barely contain her excitement. "Did you hear that, Martha? Real school. I can learn to read better, maybe even learn to write proper letters." Mama always said education was the one thing nobody could take away from you. Your mama was a wise woman. Martha brushed out Lucy's hair, noting how much healthier the child looked after just one day of regular meals and warmth. You'll go to school, and I'll work here helping Rose and Frank. We'll make this work, Lucy May. We'll make it work because we have to, and because we want to. Together. Together. The weeks that followed proved the truth of Martha's words. Rose's boarding house became a real home in ways the ranch never had, filled with laughter and conversation, the comfortable chaos of people living their lives in close quarters. Martha threw herself into the work with determination, cooking hearty meals for hungry travelers, scrubbing floors until they gleamed, mending torn sheets and worn quilts. Lucy bloomed under the attention and stability. Miss Henderson, the schoolteacher, declared her a natural student with a quick mind and a hunger for learning. In the evenings, Lucy would sit at the kitchen table working through her lessons, while Martha prepared for the next day's meals, both of them content in each other's company. But it was the small moments that truly made them a family. Martha teaching Lucy to knead bread, their hands working together in the rhythm of something older than words. Lucy reading aloud from her school books, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each page. The way they moved around each other in the crowded kitchen, anticipating needs and offering help without being asked. They were different people than they had been that night in the abandoned ranch house, stronger, more complete, bound together by something deeper than blood or law. They had chosen each other, and that choice had transformed them both. Winter came early to Cedar Ridge, blanketing the town in snow and driving travelers to seek shelter in Rose's boarding house. Martha worked harder than she had in years, but she had never been happier. Watching Lucy learn and grow, seeing her gain confidence and make friends at school, gave Martha's life a purpose and joy she had never expected to feel again. One evening in February, as they sat by the fire after a particularly busy day, Lucy looked up from her arithmetic homework with a thoughtful expression. "Martha, do you ever miss it? The ranch, I mean, your old life." Martha considered the question carefully. "I miss Thomas, and I miss some of the memories we made there. But I don't miss the loneliness, or the worry, or feeling like I was just waiting for life to end. This," she gestured to encompass the warm room, the boarding house humming with life around them. Lucy bent over her studies. "This feels like living, not just surviving." "Good," Lucy said with satisfaction. "Because I was thinking, maybe we should make it official. I mean, you're already my family, but maybe we should make it legal too, so nobody can ever separate us." The suggestion took Martha's breath away. The idea of formally adopting Lucy, of making their chosen family official in the eyes of the law, felt both thrilling and terrifying. "Are you sure, Lucy May? That's a big step. It would mean you'd be stuck with me permanently, wrinkles and sharp tongue and all. I want to be stuck with you. Forever and always." Lucy set aside her homework and moved to sit beside Martha on the small sofa. "You saved my life, you know. Not just from being hungry and cold, but from being alone. You made me believe I was worth caring about again." Martha felt tears sting her eyes. "You saved mine too, sweetheart. I was so lost when you found me. I thought my life was over, that all the good parts were behind me. But you showed me that love doesn't end, it just finds new ways to grow." They held each other in the firelight, two souls who had found their way to exactly where they belonged. Outside, the winter wind howled across the plains, but inside they were warm and safe and complete. Spring came late to Wyoming that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought news that would change their lives once more. Rose's brother-in-law, who owned a small farm outside of town, was looking for someone to manage his property. His health was failing, and he needed reliable help to keep the place running. "It's not much," Rose explained as she showed Martha and Lucy the property. 20 acres, a decent house, some chickens, a kitchen garden. "But it comes with the job, and there's talk of the railroad extending a spur line out this way. If that happens, there'll be good money in selling eggs and vegetables to the work crews." Martha walked through the modest farmhouse, Lucy at her side, both of them seeing the possibilities. A real home again, but this time built on their own terms, their own choices. A place where Lucy could grow up with space to run and dream, where Martha could put down roots that no bank could tear up. "What do you think, Lucy May?" The girl stood on the front porch, looking out at the rolling grassland that stretched toward the mountains. "I think it looks like home," she said simply. And so they began again, for the third time in less than a year. But this beginning felt different, solid, permanent, full of promise. Martha threw herself into learning the rhythms of small farming while Lucy continued her education, riding into town 3 days a week for school and helping with chores the rest of the time. They planted a garden that first spring, working side by side in the dark earth. As they worked, Martha found herself telling Lucy about her own childhood, about the dreams she had harbored as a young woman, about the long path that had led her to this moment. "I used to think my story was mostly written," Martha said as they planted beans in neat rows. "That the best chapters were behind me, and all I had left were the closing pages. But maybe that's not how it works. Maybe every day is a chance to start a new chapter, to write something different than what came before." Lucy looked up from the seeds she was carefully spacing. "What do you want this chapter to say?" Martha paused, her hands full of dark soil, and considered the question. Around them, the prairie stretched endlessly, but it no longer looked empty to her. It looked full of possibility, full of room to grow and build and become whatever they chose to make of their lives. "I wanted to say that love is stronger than loss," she said finally. "That family is what you make it, not what you're born into. That it's never too late to start over, to choose hope instead of fear, to take care of each other." Lucy nodded seriously, as if committing these words to memory. "I wanted to say that too. And I wanted to say that sometimes the best things happen when you're not looking for them. When you're just trying to survive, and then suddenly you find something worth living for." They finished their planting in comfortable silence, both lost in thoughts of the future they were building together. That evening, as they sat on their front porch watching the sun set over their land, Martha reflected on the strange turns that had brought them to this place. A year ago, she had been a widow facing an uncertain future alone. Lucy had been an orphan with nowhere to turn. But together, they had become something neither could have been apart, a family bound not by blood but by choice, not by obligation but by love. The little girl had been right. That first night in the barn, Martha had needed shelter, and Lucy had needed a mother, and they had become each other's support. But it was more than that. They had become each other's salvation, each other's second chance at happiness, each other's proof that love could bloom even in the hardest soil. As the stars came out over Wyoming, Martha reached over and took Lucy's small hand in hers. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For finding me. For choosing me. For teaching an old woman that her story wasn't over yet." Lucy squeezed her hand and smiled. "Thank you for being brave enough to start over. For showing me that family isn't about who leaves you, but about who chooses to stay." They sat together in the growing darkness, two hearts that had found their way home to each other, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. In the distance, a train whistle echoed across the plains, carrying the promise of new adventures, new possibilities, new chapters yet to be written in the endless story of love choosing love, again and again, against all odds.